Welcome back for another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. Today is a very special episode because I'm talking about a topic that I've touched on a few times with you before, but I've never really dug deep into it, and it's a really big part of my life. So today's episode is when life gives you Lyme and turning pain into purpose. And I have a special guest, Fred Diamond, who I actually met through a mutual connection. Larry Moss, I guess, met him at a networking event and sent him my way. We connected, and Fred is very, very vocal about Lyme and the Lyme community and the impact it has on the people around the person with the chronic Lyme illness as well, which is very interesting to me. It gives a different perspective. I was the one that experienced Lyme. What were the people around me experiencing simultaneously? So today's episode, we're going to be talking about Lyme, but I don't want you to check out if you don't have Lyme. I want you to listen in and think about how you can turn pain and these situations that in the moment feel like everything's going wrong, nothing's going as planned, but turn them into opportunity or purpose. So thank you for being with me today, Fred. I'm very excited, and I said before the episode, this is really fun because we've actually never met before, and so I'm learning right along with the audience at the same time. So thanks for driving all the way from the city, I call it the city, from Fairfax to Winchester today.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Sierra. I love coming to Winchester. I live in Fairfax, Virginia, and we're so fortunate to live in a state with so many beautiful cities with history, and as you know, I love coming to Winchester, and I'm excited to hit some of my favorite spots when we're done, but I'm more excited to talk to you, and I applaud you on your podcast, and I applaud you to being close to 50 episodes, and I applaud you for discussing a topic that has affected you personally, and I've spoken to thousands of people around the globe about the epidemic that is tick-borne disease and Lyme disease. So I'm excited to talk to you about whatever it is where we want to go.
You're a man of many talents, though. So tell a little bit about your background, maybe where you grew up, what led you to even look into Lyme in the first place. Why would you start a podcast about Lyme? But you also have a whole other side of you focused on sales, and I want to hear about your background with that as well.
Great. Well, as far as where I'm from Philadelphia originally. And I think in terms of Philadelphia, I know we have some Wawas out here in Winchester. So my family is well known for our love of Wawa. Went to college in Atlanta, a school called Emory. Most of my career has been in high-tech marketing. I worked for Apple Computer for a long time, Compaq Computer, and all various types of tech marketing, product marketing, geographic marketing, industry marketing. In 2011, I started an entity called the Institute for Excellence in Sales. And we're an organization that supports sales leaders at large B2B, business to business, or business to government customers. So companies like Amazon, Hilton, Salesforce, Oracle, these companies have large sales organizations. So we have a well-known Women in Sales program. We have a well-known designation called Premier Sales Employer, where we recognize those companies as being great employers. And our mission is basically to help them engage their teams, elevate their leaders, and empower their success. Beautiful. So this is very exciting. You and I are talking at the end of April. On May 1st, we will have rebranded to the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. And we're bringing our services mainly to companies with, we like to say, at least 25 salespeople, in some cases hundreds, if not thousands.
Wow.
In 2017, I started a podcast. It was called Insights for Sales Game Changers. And I literally, like you, I had my equipment. I went to VPs of sales' offices, and it was my way of meeting prospects. And I didn't have this beautiful equipment that you had. I had a mic. I had a couple filters that really didn't do anything. But I would interview VPs of sales about their career and mentors. And people got to know about the show, and people started requesting being on the show. When the pandemic happened, we kicked into doing everything over Zoom, everything virtual. And we started interviewing more people around the globe, et cetera. We started a Women in Sales show. We started a sales story podcast. We now have a podcast sub-brand coming out where we interview university professors who teach sales. And we published a book called Insights for Sales Game Changers. And our goal is to get to 1,000 shows by the end of 2025. And I applaud you again for being close to 50 shows and for taking the leap. Podcasting, FYI, for your audience, has changed my life. I get noticed, all over the place. I've spoken to so many amazing people about their careers, etc. I also published the book called Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. I published 2 books the same day, July 16th, 2022.
Okay.
I like to say I'm the only person in history who's published a book on Lyme disease and sales on the same day. And for the same lifetime, for that matter, it's part of the joke. And we give away the PDF of the Lyme book for free.
Okay.
I've been giving it away since day one. We've sold like tens of thousands of copies, or 10,000, up to 10,000 copies all around the globe. And the reason I wrote the book is I had someone in my life who had chronic Lyme disease. Around 2021. This person had what we call a major flare. Okay. And to learn more about what this person was going through, I just dove in to understand as much as I could about what you've gone through as a Lyme survivor and what millions of other Lyme survivors around the globe are going through.
Yeah. Well, thanks for digging into that and gaining the understanding, because I truly am surprised by the number of people that when I say Lyme, they have no idea what I'm talking about. And then we can even talk about this later. Doctors that don't recognize Lyme is a whole other story. So it's wonderful that you dug into it. And I know you have a lot of insights to add from interviewing all of these people that have survived Lyme. How many episodes have you done of the Lyme podcast? And its name matches the book name, right?
It does. Hope, Lyme? Yeah, it's called the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not in the Lyme industry. One of the only people in the world who doesn't have Lyme, who is an advocate. There's a lot of parents. But one thing I learned was that, like you were just saying, it's a mysterious disease. It's a tick-borne disease. There's so much about it. A tick can transmit up to 30 additional, as you know, diseases called co-infections. So the Lyme disease by itself is the most popular one. It's named after a town in Connecticut where it was first discovered in the mid-70s. FYI for your audience, there's no S at the end.
Yes, so. I was going to say that a minute ago. When people say, you have Lyme's disease, that's why I made the joke about when life gives you Lyme, because I wanted to say it's not Lyme's, when life gives you Lyme's.
No, that's great. And I tell people all the time, too, it's not like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. It's named after a town. And actually, ironically, it's a beautiful town in Connecticut where in the mid-70s, all these children started having these arthritic and neurological symptoms. And you're right, it's a very misunderstood disease. A lot of times I'll say to people, when it comes up, it's like, do you know much about Lyme disease? And sometimes people say, yeah. And I'll say, are you very aware or just aware? And usually one of two things happen. They'll say, well, it's a tick-borne disease, right? Like, absolutely. And then someone will say, a coworker's daughter.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I have a friend whose sister-in-law had Lyme disease, and it's horrible, it's devastating. And I know you've had some struggles, which you've talked about. And like you also said, it's not very well understood by the medical profession and the world as a whole. If you were to Google, does chronic Lyme disease exist? The first page you're going to see is from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, which will say, here's our treatment for Lyme, 3 weeks, typically of antibiotics. And if you have symptoms afterwards, it's called post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. We won't even acknowledge. So then imagine your family member Googles, does chronic Lyme exist? And they see this article which says no. And then they go to you, it's like, well, sister, cousin, daughter, spouse, friend, it says here that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, it does exist. And one thing I'm trying to do is to advocate and, to bring some peace to a community that needs it.
What organizations are there out there that really are advocating for Lyme? Which ones are you aware of?
There's some great ones. There's one called Global Lyme Alliance, which funds a lot of research for Lyme. There's a Lyme organization called Project Lyme, which does a lot of programs. There's a publication called limedisease.org that
Okay.
does a lot of data collection. As a matter of fact, when I post a Love, Hope, Lyme podcast every other Monday, almost invariably we'll post an article on limedisease.org.
Okay.
And some of the articles will get hundreds, if not thousands, of downloads.
Mm.
One of the challenges, there's also another organization called Center for Lyme Action, and their job is basically to get the U.S. government to fund Lyme disease research, which is a challenge right now with a lot of the cuts that are happening to foreign government. One of the challenges is, unlike the American Cancer Society or Leukemia Society or some of the big ones, there's no humongous organization that does everything. So there's like bits and pieces here. And there's also a lot of states will have like homegrown type organizations, like Northern Virginia, Fredericksburg. There's a couple of, homespun type things that try to do some support and education.
Yeah. So I'm curious that the person in your life that had Lyme, what were the initial symptoms, and when did you decide to start digging in and learning more yourself?
Yeah. So in April of 2021, this particular person who I was close to said that they needed to go off on their own to treat their Lyme.
Okay.
So it came out of the blue, and I said, I thought I knew everything that someone with Lyme goes through. And in the summer, actually the late spring of 2021, I just dove in. I bought 30 books on Amazon. I jumped up on Facebook and typed in Lyme disease, and I was shocked, Sierra, to find that there were thousands of Lyme groups on Facebook, some with tens of thousands of members, communicating back and forth about treatment, symptoms, lack of care, looking for doctors that they could recommend. And for most people who don't have Lyme, when you treat an illness or a disease, you go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Or you go to Dr. Google, or you go to CVS and you look for a pill, right? As you know, with Lyme, there's so many complicated ways to treat, especially because genetics play a role, your ability to handle stress, your ability to interface with heavy metals, genetics. These are all part of a person's recovery. There's no pill. We like to use the analogy, if you break an ankle, every doctor on the planet, from Sydney to Singapore to Saskatchewan to Sacramento, is going to take an x-ray. They're going to put you in a boot. They're going to have you take it easy for 6 weeks. Then you do 2 weeks of rehab,
Right.
and then you're going to be okay. There's no love, hope, broken ankle.
Yeah.
There's no Facebook groups for broken ankles. There's thousands across social media. Reddit has a group with 10,000 people talking every day about symptoms, treatment, care, doctor referrals. And then one of the challenges is you'll see somebody say, hey, I've had Lyme for 5 years. Should I restart antibiotics? Which is usually the most common thing. And then someone will say, absolutely, I got on what's called a PICC line, where you basically intravenous interject the antibiotics. I did that, it saved my life. And then somebody said, antibiotics didn't solve my problem.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, well, you got to give it 6 months. And then somebody said, blah, blah, blah. And you always see this, like the scales of justice. So unlike a headache, you take a Tylenol or an Advil, or if you have a cold, you take, Benadryl. With Lyme, it's so complicated. I know you've gone through a lot of that as well.
Yeah, and what you were saying about the number of people that have it, when I meet someone that has Lyme or had Lyme, which a lot of people will say, well, I found the tick, there was a ring, I did antibiotics, 10 days I was good. So, right, there's that experience
Good
with
for them,
Lyme,
yes.
right? And then there's the one where, like mine, they thought I had it for about 1.5 years before they discovered what it was. So it had done a lot of damage by that time. So the moment that someone says they have it or have had it, I feel like connected to them, like you understand what it's like. And I told you before the show that I don't always talk a ton about it, because when I first had it, I felt really sorry for myself. Like, what did I do to deserve this kind of thing, right? I went from very healthy and active and I'm a runner to bedridden. And how could that happen to me? I'm young, right? So it is so helpful to be able to connect with others who have had similar experiences, but it is so overwhelming to see everybody's recommendations and you don't know what to follow, right? It's like, well, this person says I should do this. Well, this person says absolutely not. That's the last thing you should do. Who do I listen to, and how do I find a doctor that recognizes that it's a thing and doesn't make you feel crazy for saying things about Lyme disease, and where they have actually treated someone before successfully? Right? So I completely understand how important it is to have that network, but that network can also be overwhelming to me.
Yeah. So for your listeners, I want to comment on a couple of things you said.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
For your listeners, that's not atypical. And the typical thing that I discovered is, first of all, it's very rare to see what's called the bullseye rash.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, I mean, a tick is the size of the top of a pin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And usually they dig themselves into parts of your body that you typically don't see every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the groin area, underneath your arms, in your back, right? And how often, do we look at those parts? And it's not like a mosquito. It's not like a biting sensation or a bee sting.
Mm-hmm.
It literally just latches itself on. Typically, it'll jump off of a deer or a mouse in most cases. And in areas like this, Loudoun County and, central Virginia, one of the things a couple of myths here, Lyme has been documented in every state.
Mm-hmm.
People say, oh, well, it's just in Martha's Vineyard or New England or Connecticut. Well, I met people all across the United States. The Ozarks, for example, it must be flushed with Lyme, because I've met so many people who got Lyme when they were boating or camping in the Ozarks. A couple other things. I've met people who have gotten bit in Central Park, New York.
Interesting.
Who were just walking because ticks get on birds and they fly. And there's been a lot of documentation about that. What you described is not uncommon, where you get bit, but you don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wake up one day and you have like cold-like symptoms, or what ticks basically do, it's shaped like a corkscrew, and it'll get into your soft tissue. So it'll get into your joints, and you have arthritic type symptoms. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor will say, okay, well, here's how we treat arthritis, X, Y, and Z. And you're like, okay, I have arthritis, but I'm only 25 years old and I'm pretty healthy, and I was a runner and there's no arthritis in my family.
Yeah.
So, okay, but you're the doctor, and that's what I trust you. And we're brought up to trust Western medicine, right? And this is no disrespect to most doctors. And then a month later, you get some other symptoms, headache, maybe some brain fog, maybe some of your other joints are causing problems, some back pain, fatigue. It's like, okay, so you go back to the doctor, and they're like, okay, well, it looks like you have the flu. Okay, well, it's the middle of the summer, but okay. So you take whatever they tell you to take. And then something else comes up, and then something else comes up. And then you've been to 5 doctors. And the testing, for your listeners, is very difficult for Lyme. It's not a blood test, because the bacteria from the tick gets out of the blood very quickly, and it goes into the soft tissue. So you really can't do a blood test after a couple of weeks. So it's very tough to diagnose. There's a lot of great entities, like Global Diagnostics, for example, is working on better Lyme treatment, Lyme testing diagnostics. So next thing you know, you've been to 10 doctors, and now you go to the doctor with your brother or your father or your spouse, and the doctor says, well, Sierra, we've tested you 10 times and nothing shows up.
Yeah.
Here's a psychologist we'd like you to talk to. Or, gee, what's going on in your life that's causing this stress? And then you're like, okay, maybe that's it. And your family who loves you, well, the doctor just said it's probably stress. So you go to the psychologist, eventually you go to a psychiatrist. And in some cases, I've met people who've been committed. And it ain't that, it's the Lyme.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, it's been 2 years now, and the doctors say that they don't know what's wrong with you. So, it doesn't happen with broken ankles. It doesn't happen with 99% of other diseases. It really is a nefarious disease. And again, I applaud you for being vocal here on the show.
Yeah, of course. No, thanks for sharing that, because I specifically remember walking into doctor's offices with my binder of everything I've already experienced up until this point. Let me paint the full picture for you so you know what they've already said I have or don't have, right? Because it's impacting my heart, because it's impacting my memory, right? My speech, my ability to walk up and down the stairs. Like, so all of these things, it started to be specialist appointments. So, now they're looking at my heart. Well, what's going on with your heart, right? A brain MRI. What's going on there? And I definitely did get the reaction of it's all in your head several times. And not specifically against Northern Virginia doctors, but there was an issue with a lot of the Northern Virginia doctors I was going to that I didn't experience when I found more of a holistic care specialist out here in this area that would start to think outside the box and say, well, have you been tested for Lyme? Because that would be the first thing that I looked for, right? Yeah. So the moment that I saw that, it helped me to realize, well, one, I'm not crazy, because they can kind of convince you that you are, and then your family, the people around you, are starting to question you too.
Yes.
Right? So that's a tough part. But I was lucky enough to find, a family of doctors that could support me with it, and they saved my life. So I've had 2 really bad flare-ups. I hope to never have a third. But I'm curious, for the person in your life that experienced it, at what point did they know it was Lyme?
Yeah, so what happens with a lot of people, I'll tell you the basic transcription, I guess, is I've met so many people who were bitten when they were children. Mm-hmm. They went camping or a family trip or something.
Yeah.
And some things happen, but okay, you're a kid. So, and most people aren't aware of Lyme. Mm-hmm. It's become more aware in the last couple of years that people are beginning to recognize it. Mm-hmm. And, there's been some celebrities like Yolanda Hadid was on the Housewives show. Tommy Hilfiger's daughter wrote a book. Avril Lavigne, the singer, has announced that she's had Lyme. So Alec Baldwin, Daryl Hall, so it's getting some degree of attention, but it's still a very unknown and mysterious disease. So, like I said, you have these symptoms, and then you go to a doctor who says, oh, I know what it is. It's definitely chronic fatigue syndrome. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. I have chronic fatigue syndrome. And then you're happy because you're treating chronic fatigue, and it makes sense because you have this chronic fatigue. And then you're still having problems. Like when you mentioned flares, when stressors happened, COVID stressed a lot of people. The Moderna, I shouldn't be talking about that, but a certain government recommended shot, I think caused a lot of stress, which reignited flares for a lot of people. Hope you don't mind that I just kind of diverted right there.
No, you're totally fine.
But then it takes a lot of people years, if not decades, for a doctor like yours that you met here in Winchester, your PA, or your PA, I guess.
Yeah, so actually, no, the PA has helped with my care after the fact, but the Lee Clinic in Winchester. So it was Dr. William Lee and his daughter, Megan Lee. Dr. William Lee has since passed, so his daughter now runs the practice.
Okay, may he rest in peace. And then a doctor or a medical practitioner said, I think it might be Lyme. And then they do a test, and there's some evidence of it. So now, 10, 20, 30 years into your journey, someone says, you have this thing called Lyme, and we're convinced it's Lyme. So you and thousands, if not tens of thousands of other people were like, great, I have Lyme, let's get to it. And then, as we talked before, we realized how difficult it is to treat. Yeah. And the fact that it depends on so many other factors, how you get treated. But, you have this thing in your head for years, it's like, something's going on here. And then I've talked to so many people who are like, I was so thrilled when it was inconclusively confirmed that it's Lyme disease. But then you realize, oh, it's like, God, this is very difficult to treat, and it may come back, and I have to avoid all these foods, and I have to be concerned about the heavy metals in my body, and I have to be concerned about genetics, and I can't go near gluten, and God forbid I go into a pizzeria because there's gluten in the air, and some people are extremely sensitive and some aren't. And like we talked before, one of the challenges is every single patient has their own history as it relates to Lyme.
Yeah.
And there are many ways that will abate some of the symptoms. But then, like you said, there's other things that come into play. It's like something else shows up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, and then for let your listeners know, you're like the one who's dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's an expression, you don't get Lyme until you get Lyme, and you don't want to get Lyme.
Mm-hmm.
And as I wrote the book, Love, Hope, Lyme, because I realized that I was very close to a person, and I was a very devoted person. I didn't know. I knew 5% of what there is to know about this disease.
Yeah.
And here I am, Sierra, 4 years later, talking on my 30th podcast about this ridiculous disease that destroys livelihoods, breaks families, ends relationships because of a tick.
Yeah.
You didn't smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I presume you didn't.
No.
I mean, you didn't again, I'm not going to go to you personally on your history, but you got bitten by a tick.
Yeah.
A tick. You didn't walk into a room where there was a sign that said, don't walk into this room, there's a tick.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's so, I've spoken to so many people in a similar situation. You don't put yourself in this situation, but it just happens.
Well, thinking about caring for a person with Lyme, and I have shared before in a previous episode that I'm Miss Independent. So I never want anyone to care for me. I want to be able to prove I can do it myself, right? But to be in a position where you truly can't and you have to depend on someone else to care for you, that's a very difficult position to be in. And I think, mentally and emotionally, it takes a big toll on you to be in that position. And I believe I did share on an episode before that my ex did reveal to me after the relationship ended that he felt it was because he had to become my caretaker. And that was never the role he thought he would have to play, right? So thinking about the impact it's having on the people around you is so important too. So as you wrote your book, what are some of the things that you had to deal with and experience knowing that someone in your life had Lyme that you cared about?
Right behind us, there's a picture of Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
And I came across the quote, only a life lived in the service of others is a life worth living. Mm-hmm. And that's an Einstein quote. And a lot of people, I never knew the term caregiver. I never thought of myself as a caregiver. But the particular person was very independent and spoke as you just did. Mm-hmm. When you love somebody, you want them to have their health, right? You want them to be able to do things. You want them to be able to go out on a Saturday night. You want them to be able to, go dancing and go travel and not have to carry like 50 medicines with them in a container. You want, if you're healthy, it's that expression, when you're healthy, you could do a million things. And when you don't have your health, you can only think of one thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that's so true, as I've spoken to so many people. It's a challenge. And I just want to throw out one other thing. I was studying this like crazy in the summer of 2021. And I listened to a webinar with the top Lyme doctor in the world.
Okay.
And for the first 55 minutes, I knew everything that he was saying. I was like, yep, because I had just dug into this topic. And then at the 59th minute of a 1-hour webinar, he said, oh, by the way, if you have unresolved childhood trauma, you need to address it or else you're never going to cure the chronic illness. And I was like, oh, okay. That's another little angle there. Interesting angle. We could probably...
haven't heard that one before, Fred.
That was a huge one. And then I got to know this particular doctor and I asked him afterwards, what was that all about? Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't know, he goes, every patient I've ever had that hasn't been able to cure themselves, there was some type of childhood trauma that they needed to resolve. So the reason I bring up that is it's not just a physical thing where you have a cold. Mm-hmm. Your listeners may hear I have some allergies right now, but going to take some pills and I'll be fine. Mm-hmm. Lyme is a disease that there's so much to it. Mm-hmm. It's like, and you mentioned the independence of not wanting support.
Yeah.
Okay, well, figure out how to get past that because there are people who want to support you. Mm-hmm. And I've met a lot of men and women who were very active, who were marathon runners, who ran companies, and then this disease takes hold, and you can't run a marathon, or if you can, you're going to be in bed for 3 weeks later, or you have all these joint problems. If you eat like a piece of toast, it's like, well, I'm going to try it. It should be okay. The next day you wake up because of the gluten. And just FYI, what gluten does, it blocks the destruction of the bad bacteria. So if you have Lyme disease, for your listeners, the whole goal is to get the Lyme and other bacteria and parasites out of your body. Gluten blocks that. I mentioned heavy metals. They block that. Mold blocks the destruction of the bacteria. So there's so many different angles here. But emotionally, you're dealing with a disease that no one knows. Most of us think, again, I have allergies, I'm going to take some Benadryl, should be fine tomorrow. I have a headache, I'm going to take some Tylenol, should be fine tomorrow. Broke my ankle, going to go to the doctor, and 8 weeks later I'll be fine.
Wow. Well, it's interesting that you brought up the childhood trauma, because what you don't know is April is Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month. And I had Kelly Bober, who's the executive director of a nonprofit here in the area, the Child Safe Center, on, and we talked about the impact of childhood trauma on the rest of your life. And here's another example of, if we don't properly take care of the children who are going through these experiences and resolve the trauma and give them the therapy that they need, here's another way that it's going to continue to impact them.
Yeah, good for you. I'm glad you had that tie in there. Everybody's had traumas in their life. And, imagine for your listeners having this disease that you're trying to care for, right? You're doing what the medical world tells you to do. And then you mentioned you had 2 major flares. Imagine, for whatever reason, people have said, a mental or emotional thing could spur a flare. A car accident. I've heard people who tripped, and, hit their knee on the ground, and all of a sudden the bacteria that was resident and in remission inside there, again, this bacteria gets into your soft tissue and will reside there in your entire body without being deterred for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And then something happens, some type of stressor, and then all of a sudden, everything's back in place again. So I'm glad you had Kelly on, and it's I've done a couple of shows, a couple of the Love Hope podcasts on resolving traumas, and it's just another angle of how nefarious this disease is.
Yeah, it's talking about the running a marathon piece. Since I was a runner, it's almost like I measured my success with overcoming Lyme. I measured it with if I could run again, and I was told you're never going to be able to run like you used to, and I have the attitude of I'll prove that I can. And so I was training for a half marathon when I had one of my flare-ups where I basically was knocked on my butt, and it was like, we told you you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So it's been a big problem for me too, for like my exercise. I've got a little bit of an all or nothing mindset. I want to run so bad. It's the best form of exercise for me, but I know that if I push myself, I'm going to knock myself into another flare up. So it's this so I don't do anything at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hopefully you'll run again.
Yeah.
Great.
I did a mile last week. It was very hard for me, but I did a mile. It's certainly not a half marathon, but it's progress.
No, that's great. And I, for all your listeners, if you get to see Sierra, encourage her to run. I'm not minimizing that you can't, that right now, but I've met people who there's actually an organization called Lyme Warrior, and they do a couple of 5Ks over the course of the year. And actually the founder is not too far from here, down in Blacksburg. I guess it's kind of far, but straight down 81. Yeah.
Actually did that 5K.
Oh, did you? Good.
So it was a wonderful surprise. My family surprised me. That was my first time I ran since my Lyme disease, and they all showed up to run with me and support me.
Very good.
And it was amazing. And it was really hard to make it through the 5K, which was so weird for me to have my brother running alongside me, encouraging me, saying you can make it, where 5K was nothing to me before, right? And so it was interesting to experience that in such a different way.
And you did it. I mean, it's good. I'm glad you're familiar with it. By the way, for your listeners, I think it's on May 17th in Blacksburg. They have a couple going on. And good. And you'll run again.
Yeah, I will. I will. So you've interviewed a lot of people with chronic Lyme.
Mm-hmm.
What are a few of the common myths that you've heard, as well as some of the most common patterns in how folks kind of approach their treatment once they knew what it was?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that probably the most common myth before is that, well, it's just a mid-Atlantic or a New England thing. I've met people. Matter of fact, when I published my book, Love, Hope, Lyme, in July of 2022, the first organization that reviewed it was the Lyme Disease Association of Australia. And I don't know how they found it, but they did, and they wrote a beautiful review of it. And Lyme disease in Australia is absolutely horrible. The government doesn't believe that it exists. So there's a lot of legal things going on. So yeah, I've met people all over the world. It's not like we talked before, like cured by a pill. So it's not like go take some kind of pill and you'll be fine. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. I've met people who have gone the antibiotic route. I've met a lot of people who've gone the herbal route. I've met people who have traveled Sierra to Peru in South America to take mushroom-like medicines to find ways to get cured. Right? I mean, most people, you drive to the local CVS and imagine having to get on a plane to go to Peru to have some kind of an exotic type of medicine that may cure you. The other thing too is it's another myth is that I mean, you're a leadership coach. You know, I see all these amazing, inspirational quotes, and I've listened to your previous episodes where, it's about leadership and demonstrating leadership tendencies. Mind body is an interesting mix. Mind body spiritual. It would be great to be able to say, okay, I'm over it. I'm on top of the Lyme. I'm on top of the Lyme. It's hard when it's there. I know people who've gone completely, they meditate, they have a lot of spiritual involvement, mind over matter. I interviewed someone on my podcast who dove into nature. She took off her shoes and she went to the beach and she went into the mountains to show that her mind was over what a tick could do. And when I posted that show, I had people who commented, what the hell are you talking about? I ain't going into the beach. I'm not going to go into a mountain without wearing like clothes all over my body and socks and sweats and a mask and all those things. So I had to change when we posted that show. I had to go back and edit some of the things out because people were getting traumatized. So
interesting.
Yeah, so there's the fear that, like you said before, that it's going to happen again.
The times that I've found a tick on me since I knew I've had Lyme, I've literally had like a panic attack.
Yes.
I grew up in the sticks. I had ticks on me all the time. So when people first asked me, do you remember the tick? I'm like, you know how many I've had on me? How would I know which one it was? Right? But yeah, something else you said I want to piggyback on, all the different types of treatment. I had someone reach out to me during my second flare-up and ask if I wanted to fly across the country and come to their farm where they raised bees.
Yes.
And it was bee sting therapy.
Yeah.
And I was actually entertaining that idea. They were actually recording a TV show on their property and they wanted people to come do it. And I consulted my doctor and they were like, I don't know about this. I think the risk is a little bit not worth the reward. So there was that, and you have to question, well, is it worth it? Is it worth getting stung by hundreds and thousands of bees in order to, I guess, it increased your antihistamines?
Yeah.
So anyway, that, and I had someone else in my life that went overseas to have basically their blood heated up to a temperature in which it was supposed to kill the bacteria and then put back in their body, and then they ended up getting really, really sick. And it was not the outcome they were looking for.
So a couple things. So I don't have Lyme. So I have never been treated for Lyme.
Yeah.
My mother said I once had a tick on my head when I got a haircut when I was like 5 or something. But I've never had antibiotics to treat Lyme. I've never taken an herbal.
Yeah.
I've never had to think about getting bee venom. I've seen people who swear by bee venom, who say, for your listeners, again, this is a situation. There's no pill. So people like Sierra, it's a common thing that you're dealing with every single day. And what type of a doctor do you go through? And is this doctor any good? You know, I'll see on the Facebook groups, and like I mentioned before, there's like 1,000 Facebook groups. I'll see somebody post, I'm thinking about going to Dr. X.
Yeah.
Does anybody have an experience? And then someone will say, I took my daughter and it didn't do any good. And then someone will say, save my life. And then someone will say, yes, but I don't believe in how this doctor treats whatever. And then someone else will say, well, again, you need to give it 6 months. So there's a whole degree of trust that goes into it. It's for your people who are listening, it shows you how complex it is. I'm going to say one other thing. There was someone who promoted urine, drinking your own urine.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen who are watching this, there was a huge advocate for drinking your own urine. And I sent an email to one of the top Lyme doctors in the world. And I said, I'm not going to post this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to copy this. I'm going to delete it when you respond. Is urine therapy something that people should consider? And this particular Lyme doctor wrote back to me right away, absolutely not. It shows you how desperate people with this disease can be. So again, what you just described, I know people who've gone to overseas. There's facilities in Germany and Mexico who do that type of treatment. It's not allowed in the United States, but yeah, that's what it comes to, people.
Wow. So tell me about the name of your book and your podcast, because they match. How did you decide upon that name? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so the book, for people to remind them, it's called Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. And I was writing a book about sales, performance, and people reached out to me. I wrote an article for LymeDisease.org that got thousands of responses, and people reached out and said, you know, no one's written a book from the loved one's perspective. So I wrote 2 books at the same time in winter and spring of 2022. I originally was going to call the book Love, Loss, Lyme. First of all, it was alliterative, which was good.
Yeah.
But I've met so many people, Sierra, who've lost everything, who've lost relationships, who've lost livelihoods, lost their health, lost decades of their lives. And I said, I don't need to be perpetuating loss. I want to perpetuate some hope.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Give the marketplace some hope. So I began to find people also who said, I heard this stat where someone said to me as I was writing the book, I'm going to say 2 things about why I continued with the book. I saw there was a need. You know, I'm a marketer by trade.
Yeah.
So there was no book. There was a bunch of books written by doctors. There was some books written by celebrities. There was books first person. I call those my battle with the tick books. And then there was a whole slew of keto diet and Lyme, herbals and Lyme, meditation and Lyme. But there was no book written from this angle about how to love someone who has this disease. Someone said to me that they believe that up to 75% of committed relationships will end when someone has chronic Lyme disease. And 95% of the time, it's the spouse who says, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. You're always sick. You weren't sick when we met. Look, I just Googled chronic Lyme and the CDC says it doesn't exist. You know, I'm out of here. And 95% of the time, it's the spouse who said that they were out. So I loved a particular person, and I wanted to find out what was going on, and I wanted to bring some peace and hope to the marketplace. I'm going to share something that's a little disturbing. Okay. I mentioned Facebook groups. So I was kind of watching the various Facebook groups in the in spring of 2022, someone who went by the Facebook name Chelsea Peace posted into one of the popular Lyme groups, I'm done with this. Can someone please PM me how to take my own life? Suicide is the number one cause of death with tick-borne diseases. And everybody wrote back, sweetheart, don't do it, please. Call me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I screenshot that. And, in the few moments I had about should I do this, I would look at that particular thing. In October, after I published the book in 2022, somebody posted, hey, by the way, does anybody remember Chelsea Peace? By the way, she did kill herself with a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter. And that's what this disease will do to people.
That's heartbreaking. Well, I'm so glad you decided to write the book. I'm excited to dig into it. I think it will be very interesting. I hope to never have another flare-up and for my loved ones to actually have to deal with that. But I'm excited to dig in. So I'm curious, because you have a sales background, right? How has that helped you advocate for Lyme disease?
So I like to say, again, I'm the only person who's ever written a Lyme book and a sales book on the same day.
Yeah.
I just began to find out. I mean, I thought I knew everything that there was to know. I was a very devoted and caring person, and I thought I was doing everything. And my motto was keep someone out of stress and find out where the best gluten-free pizza is. And then as I started digging into this, I was like, I knew 5% of what there was to know. And over a 12-year period, the only thing I ever Googled was gluten-free pizza. And then when I Googled Lyme disease and I began to find all these things that chronic Lyme survivors go through, I was like, something needs to be out there. And I literally, Sierra, when I published the book, I make the PDF for free, like I mentioned. I'm not in the Lyme industry. As someone who's a professional marketer, I want people to read my book.
Yeah.
I donate everything to Lyme charities. There's a couple we talked about before, and some smaller micro type charities. So I don't sell supplements. I don't have a community where people pay $50 a month, to get my stuff. It's everything I contribute is free. But I get like 10, 15, 20 people a day who reach out and God bless me and thank me. And that wasn't the goal.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, to be honest with you, I'm going to say something, but I've actually met with customers of mine who reached out, very senior people who have reached out and said, my niece has Lyme disease and I bought 10 copies of your book and now we're much more empathetic to what she's going through.
Aww.
And I've had that, dozens of times. I'm talking like VPs of big Fortune, 1,000 type companies who are running sales organizations of hundreds of people who found out about it. You and I are connected on LinkedIn. I post something every day on LinkedIn. Every 10 posts is a Lyme disease related post. Today, we're doing today's interview in April, middle of April. My LinkedIn post this morning was about one of my Lyme shows. I interviewed a woman, her name is Dr. Jaquel Patterson, who wrote a book about how Lyme affects women specifically with a whole bunch of angles. She covered every angle, just a beautiful book. So I posted it today on LinkedIn.
Okay.
There aren't that many posts going every day on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of people who reached out to me. My niece has Lyme, or a guy who works for me, his wife has Lyme. It's one of those diseases where it touches everybody. It's not as ubiquitous as like cancer or, the kid down the street who has Down syndrome or something, or leukemia. But this is one of those diseases, and it ain't going away because of global climate change. People would say, oh, it's a summertime disease in New England. Well, climate change. So ticks are out much more frequently. Ticks have been found all across the United States. Eastern Canada is horrible. Western Canada, for that matter. I interviewed a doctor in Poland who treats people all over Europe. UK, Ireland are in really, really bad shape. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So through your book, it sounds like you are trying to, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, educate those so they can better support the individual. Can you give us just a glimpse into what are some of the things that people can be doing to support those that they love with Lyme?
Yeah. And first of all, thanks again, for talking about this.
Of
And
course.
I just, just want to applaud you for being open to discuss this. And you have a platform and you have people who follow you. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I'll just say three things. One is know that it's a real thing. It is not a mysterious disease. Well, it is mysterious, but it's not a, what's the word when you make up medical symptoms?
Oh, yes. I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Hypochondriac.
Yes.
It's not you're not the person who
Yeah.
who has Lyme disease has a disease that is transferred by, it's called vector borne. It's typically transferred by ticks. There's a new variant of it called alpha-gal syndrome, which is technically not Lyme, but it's another tick-borne illness called the red meat allergy, where if you're bitten by what's called a Lone Star tick and you get this alpha-gal disease, you eat red meat, you're going to go into shock and you're going to have a whole lot of various symptoms. Tick-borne diseases are real, so believe them first and foremost. Secondly, you said something that was quite interesting before, Sierra, where we said a lot of things that are interesting, but you said, you wanted to be Miss Independent, you didn't want support, you're a high achieving person with a lot of success. I can take this on. Well, there may be days that, you can't. So as I tell people who have a spouse, typically a wife or a husband with Lyme, usually it's a wife as a spouse, go to the PTA meetings, take care of the kids, cook the meals. Know that, you can figure out how to take out the trash, right? I have a whole chapter on things that you should be aware of that maybe the wife does. And it was a really big problem during COVID because imagine like your wife with Lyme and you're the one who's usually in charge of the household. You're usually in charge of the kids. You're usually in charge of the meals, right? And you have to also work and you have this disease. It's insurmountable. Be empathetic. I've had people who've reached out and used the E word, empathy, so many times. It's so nice to see someone who's empathetic and learn more about it. Again, I didn't know that there were co-infections, which each co-infection, Bartonella, Babesia, cat scratch fever, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, these are all diseases on their own, right? And I remember I spoke to a Lyme doctor, a Lyme literate medical doctor, who once said, if all we had to treat was Lyme, we would have figured it out by now. But a tick will transmit, in some cases, like I mentioned, as many as 30 comorbidities, co-infections. So I remember I did my first Love, Hope, Lyme podcast with a guy named Dr. Harwitz, who's one of the most well-known Lyme literate medical doctors. And his recommendation was, know that it's a real thing.
Yeah, that's powerful. So there are a couple things in there I want to address. And just interesting fact, when I have podcast guests on, I will tell you, this is a Lyme challenge. I hear things that I want to comment on and I have to save them until the person's finished speaking. And you don't know how many times I go to speak and I can't find my words. My memory is not like it used to be. And honestly, I really struggle with that because it makes me feel dumb. Like that I can't remember things for more than 5 seconds, or someone has to say the same thing to me over and over again. I've already told you that before. Why am I having to repeat myself? So anyway, as you're talking, I think of all these things and hopefully I can remember them. So one of them, see, it just left me. Go ahead.
First of all, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
I've done over 800 podcast interviews and you're doing a great job. One thing that I've learned over the last couple of years that changed my life, and like you, I'm a high performer and I have a lot of great customers. This is one thing that changed me when I got to go deep into this and see what people go through. I was very hard on myself. When this happened 4 years ago, I did a deep analysis of who I was, right, in the world. And one thing that I noticed was I went back and read all these journals. I was a big journal person, and we talk about that a lot at the Institute for Effective Professional Selling, journal and take notes and all these kinds of things. I went back and I reread all these journals and I listened to all these iPhone messages that I left. And one thing I noticed, Sierra, was I was really hard on myself. and my self-talk was horrible. I would say something like, hey, you just got IBM as a customer. How come you didn't get Microsoft?
Oh,
What's wrong with you? You know, you just got Oracle and IBM. How come you didn't get Microsoft, Facebook, and Amazon as customers? What are you doing wrong? And I would read these journals and listen to all these Apple iPhone messages. And I finally said, talk to yourself nicer. I remember I went to a friend of mine, and she said, who's like a coach, and she said, well, you don't talk to us that way. And she goes, why are you talking to yourself that way? And I completely changed my self-talk. And whenever I find myself going, like I'll say, for example, okay, you got IBM today as a customer. What do we need to do to get Microsoft?
Reframe it.
Reframe it. And I started saying something that literally changed my life. Whenever I would notice that type of thought, I would say to myself, give yourself grace.
Yeah.
And give yourself grace. Oh, okay. I think I'm going to give myself grace. And then it was gone.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you for not getting IBM as a Microsoft as a customer? What's wrong with you for forgetting the word that you were trying to say? I've used that so many times that I use it a lot still. If I notice like, you're late, why are you, give yourself grace. You know, just get there next time, whatever.
That's really helpful. People do call me out on my self-talk sometimes. And some people have said to me, if you stop telling yourself that your memory is bad, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. You just keep telling yourself that it is. And then I'm like, but it is. I did remember what I was going to say, so thank you for that. When you were talking about the co-infections, I think another obstacle that comes up is now anytime I have any health stuff going on, the automatic reaction is for everybody to say, well, I guess that's a part of your Lyme, and connect it back to that. And then the question is, well, what am I treating here? Is it coming from Lyme? Am I just treating the symptoms over here? What are we supposed to do, right? So I try to keep stress levels down. I try to get enough sleep and do all the right things, but I can see on the days where I'm stressed out and I start to is it Raynaud's? Yeah, Raynaud's phenomenon. Have you heard of that before? So I lose blood flow to my fingers and toes. And so they go completely white, and it's such an uncomfortable feeling. And I have to literally try and push blood down into my hands and my feet. But I notice it's on the days where I'm stressed out, and then I'm like, well, is this a Lyme thing, or is there something else going on? And so you're constantly questioning. So that creates kind of another layer of issues.
Just want to comment on that for your listeners. So that's something, again, that I've spoken to so many Lyme survivors about, is something happens. Is it Lyme? Gee, I'm tired today. Is it because of the Lyme? Well, maybe it was because we just traveled over the last 3 days. Just want to throw one thing out there, having spoken to dozens of Lyme medical practitioners, the one thing that they all say is critical is sleep. Good, fresh, clean sleep.
Yeah.
7, 8 hours, 9 hours, whatever it might be. And that keeps coming up time and time again. Yeah, we talked before about herbals and antibiotics and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sleep is one that comes up so many times.
Yeah.
Proper amount of sleep, and not just in the Lyme world, but also I think Arianna Huffington recently wrote a book on sleep, and it's become such a common thing that people need to address. So thanks for reminding me about that. That was one that has come up from almost every single Lyme doctor that I've spoken to, is that you need to get a proper amount of sleep.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because I just started wearing this Aura ring that my friend had given to me, and it measures sleep amongst other things. And I've been flagged every night that I'm not getting restful sleep because of an elevated heart rate. And so my resting heart rate is really high right now. And so I am waking up, my readiness score for the day is really low. I'm waking up feeling like I'm not rested at all. And so I have typically a 3 p.m. wall that I hit where I feel like someone has sucked the life out of me. And at that moment, I have to decide, Do I need to step away? Can I lay down for a nap? Because I used to do that for myself. Take a nap to make it through the rest of the day, which seems ridiculous to the normal person, but it's what it takes to get through. Or do I need to just push through this first few minutes where it feels like this? Go outside, get sunlight, something to push me through. But if I don't get 9 hours of sleep, I feel exhausted when I get up in the morning. And so having people around you that want to spend time with you and enjoy your company at the end of the day, I'm already drained. Like, I have nothing left for the people in my life by the time I finish my work day, because this is exhausting to me.
So it goes back to your question before of what should people know, and what are the limits, right? And what can you can't do. And I've met so many Lyme survivors like you who are high functioning, high energy, high performers. They love life. They want everything out of life, career, business, health, etc. And, one of the things we learned during the pandemic is sometimes you just need to shut down, and the W word, wellness, and companies are becoming more aware of that wellness is such a big part of everything.
Yeah.
So that's something that people need to be aware of, the ones who are in your life, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to, I know it's called branching out for a reason, because we are taking a different look at leadership, right? We're not just talking about managing conflict in the workplace, right? Leading yourself effectively, which means taking care of your body. So whether you have Lyme or not, really being aware of, listening, the mind-body connection, listening to your body and knowing when something's wrong and actually doing something about it. Because if you wait too long, like I felt I waited too long to start exploring why my symptoms were happening. When I was a teacher, I was having to sit down to teach. I couldn't stand up anymore. I was exhausted from that. I was noticing these changes, but I waited too long to do anything about it. But I want people to pay attention to their health, and make sure that they're proactively, like preventative care is important, that they're proactively taking care of themselves too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, we spend a lot of time talking at the Institute for Effective Professional Selling about the whole person, mindfulness, right? And caring and, spiritual health sometimes. The ability to learn, the ability to listen, the ability to, just get complete. And also, it's funny, like we went back and reviewed all the words that we used on our Sales Game Changers podcast.
Okay.
And empathy was the number one word.
Interesting.
Yeah, so be empathetic to word. And one thing that the pandemic got us smarter about is where other people are, right? Now, not everybody that you're going to deal with is also challenged with a chronic illness, but, there are other things that people are challenged with. Maybe the kid's sick or something like that. There are other factors that we've gotten to be aware of.
Well, it's not like you're wearing a name tag that says I have Lyme disease. So if you would look at me, you wouldn't know that I have chronic Lyme. And so I feel like there's almost an expectation that I be normal and have a normal level of energy and activity in my life, and I'm not. And so sometimes I feel like I have to say and hold a boundary and say, I can't do this because this is I'm walking a tightrope, and this is gonna be what might throw me overboard, and I have to protect that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to switch here for a second and give you an opportunity. Do you have any questions for me? Because you're typically on the other side of this conversation. Are there any questions that you ask on your podcast typically that you want to ask me?
Yeah, so thanks. And first of all, for people who are listening or watching, I applaud you for doing this and for inviting me to be on your show here and to talk about this. I literally can't believe that 4 years that we could talk for 8 hours about this particular topic, and there's so many places we can go deep into what I've spoken about. Tell your listeners how you make it through the day. Again, we're in your beautiful studio here. I know you're moving into another one, but it's very inspirational. When I walked in, it was like, okay, very nice. And you have beautiful signs about coaching and gratitude, and it has there's a sign here that says there is no such thing as too many books. And I have a huge library in my house as well. Yeah. So, we just talked about this disease that, for your listeners, I know people who haven't gotten out of bed in weeks. And I know people who can't go to work because of the exhaustion and the brain fog and the fatigue and some of the neurological things that happen with it. And here you are conducting just a wonderful interview with someone you just met, and you're asking great questions. Give your audience a peek into, like, how do you do it?
That's a great question. Well, I will say that any of the experiences that I've had in life that I would say were the most difficult, I tried to turn around and see from a different perspective and have them help propel me forward instead of hold me back. And I've talked about that a little bit on here before, but a big part of that is when I was on my second flare up and I was on bed rest, and I literally got the certification to be a leadership development coach, speaker, trainer while on bed rest because I had to have a purpose. I felt like my entire background was being ripped away from me. I couldn't move into, leadership and education. I've thrown away my master's, that's what I was telling myself. But then I flipped it around and I'm like, what can I do while I'm in bed to make the most of this time? So I launched my business as soon as I was up, moving, walking, talking again. Everything was quote unquote normal. But I've had to focus on impact. My focus every day is whose life can I impact today? That each interaction that I have, what can I do to add value to that person, to help them to see their value, right? So that honestly, impact is what gets me through my day. When I get up in the morning, it is very challenging. I have a lot of self-talk going on of you really need more sleep. No, but you have to do this. You made a commitment. And it's the back and forth. Well, you could hit snooze one more time. Your body really needs it. No, you've made this commitment, right? So I have a lot of that going on all the time in my head of, is this too much? Is it going to push me over the edge? And so it's hard. It is a mental challenge for me still. I think most people probably don't know how it impacts me with my memory or my heart, or I'm having physical therapy right now for my hips because laying in bed at night, if I try to lay any way but flat on my back, my hips kill me. The pain just radiates through my legs. And so I deal with pain that people don't know about, or the brain fog, it still impacts me in so many different ways. So, life isn't that easy. I try to make it look easy sometimes, and I try to play this part where I'm strong and I'm confident, and it's not always like that. I have my my breakdowns behind the scenes where it's been too much.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, one thing I've become much more aware of in the last couple of years, and again, I deal with sales professionals, B2B, business to business. They work for big companies. They're serving big customers who are doing big things in government or health or financial services or transportation, whatever it might be. And these are people with a lot of responsibilities that need to get things done. And everyone has struggles. That's one thing I became very aware of over the last couple of years is everybody's challenged with something, right? And then you couple it with this disease. It just makes it even more so. So I want to ask you about your nutrition.
Okay.
So, you're drinking water, which is great. So
Sometimes I do that. I try. Thanks to Stanley. I mean, Stanley's been around forever, but as of recent, it's been helpful for me.
Well, I've been for people who are listening here, even with water, we talked about heavy metals that inhibit the breakdown of the disease. I know people who will only drink purified water, not spring water, because they're afraid of some of the heavy metals that may be resident in, some of the water that comes out of the springs, etc. So give us a peek into, are you gluten-free, by the way?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I will give you a peek into it. So I had a food allergy test when I was dealing with Lyme in the beginning, and I was having a reaction to 25 different things. So I did an autoimmune protocol diet for a year and a half. I eliminated all 25 things. that I couldn't have, which meant you couldn't go out to eat for sure. Everything had to be made at home. And one of the things, interestingly enough, was red meat. So I eliminated everything, and then I slowly reintroduced one thing at a time to see how my body reacted to it. And by doing a full elimination diet, I now am able to eat gluten without a reaction to it.
Good.
Now, I say without a reaction to it. Could I have less brain fog if I didn't eat gluten? Maybe, right? I don't know. But I don't feel like it impacts me in the way that it used to when I first, started having Lyme symptoms and I was dealing with a lot of that. So now my nutrition, honestly, it's up and down. Do you ever have like days where you're like, you make it through a challenge and then you reward yourself with something silly? Like, I don't know. It's food for me sometimes where I'm like, last night, I deserve carrot cake because I worked hard today, right? So I make some poor choices sometimes when it comes to food. My nutrition is not clean, like a clean diet like you would expect. I'm like, man, I'm working really hard right now. I deserve to eat this, but it might not be the best thing for my body. So I would say I'm on a little bit of a roller coaster where I'm like, I'm going to make smoothies at home. I'm going to, be healthy this week. And then it's the chaos of life and I can't live like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a roller coaster. I'm not good with nutrition, honestly, Fred.
Well, to be honest with you, there's a Dunkin' Donuts every block.
Yeah.
So everybody who lives in the United States is struggling with that. I want to ask you also, is mold a challenge with you?
You know what? We discovered at the school that I was teaching at in Fairfax County, there was some mold issues going on, and we realized that was impacting me. I have had challenges before where I go into a place where I can smell like mold and mildew. I know that there's a problem, and I do seem to have a reaction to it. But I don't know how much of my issues are based on mold in a specific setting. Like our home right now, I was saying to our producer earlier, that we need our HVAC cleaned out. It has not been cleaned since I lived there, so like 3 or 4 years. And what could be in there that's impacting me. So some of these symptoms that I have, is it environmental that's causing it, or is it just kind of my baseline now? I don't know.
It's interesting you mentioned before, sunlight. I met somebody who said being out in the sun, I guess vitamin D, comes from the sun, is what saved him.
Wow.
And he said he had a lot of the symptoms that we talked about. Spent hundreds. And by the way, for your listeners, Lyme is typically not covered by insurance.
No.
So maybe your initial shots, like within 3 weeks, might be covered. The initial antibiotics, if you catch it quick enough. But for the most part, Lyme doctors, they don't cover insurance. There's a whole bunch of different reasons, which we don't know how to go into. But I've met people who've spent tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. We talked about find me exotic, type things, if you will. But I talked to somebody who had classic things like we talked about, and he said one day he was out in the sun, and he said all the symptoms were gone. Now, I'm not saying he got cured at that moment, and nighttime happens, of course, but it's called, terrestrial is another way that certain people look at in getting some degree of treatment, if you will.
So financial impact, I have told this to my listeners, but I'll tell you. So last year I did like total overhaul of my finances because of Lyme debt. So I had $55,000 in credit card debt that I paid off completely last year. That has been this huge burden on me that I felt like I was just carrying forward, and it was weighing me down, and I need to get rid of it. But that was because of exactly what you're saying. I did not have insurance coverage for the tests that I was having done or the medications that I was taking. So I just would charge everything to credit cards, and it put me in so much debt. And someone that I don't like owing anything to anyone. It makes me feel guilty, honestly. It was really, really hard. I basically had to, for an entire year, restrict, like I couldn't go to Dunkin' Donuts, right? Restrict so I could save every penny to feel like I could just put that behind me and pay it off.
Well, it's people I've spoken to have said that they needed to remove all stress from their lives. I met somebody who said she wanted to build a square hole around her to remove all the stress. Well, we live in a world, where there's stressors
everywhere.
Everywhere. If you're in any type of relationship, there's going to be stress. If you live in a country, and then you have big things like a pandemic or a global economic crisis or war, etc. Things related to, like we talked before, about the environment, global change, things on global climate change, etc. So, and then finance, of course, it's a huge one. People say they want to remove the stress, and that's great. But as a human being, right, who wants to do things, you get in your car, there's going to be stress. So, take care of the ones that you can.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because it was probably about 3 months or so ago. I had been having some issue with my throat. It felt like it was closing all the time, like I couldn't breathe. It hurt to swallow. It was weird. And I went to this ENT, and he did like a whole scope thing. Not a great experience. I should not be awake for that. And at the end of it, he said, well, I feel like you have acid burns in your throat. And he's like, so basically, you just need to stress less.
Thanks, Doc.
And I just laughed at him. I'm like, are you serious? That's what you're telling? Stress. That's okay. Thanks. I said, I'll get right on that. But
I've had
really?
I've had hundreds of people say the same thing, where the doctor said you need to remove stress from your life.
Yeah.
It sounds like you work too hard. Yeah, it's it's yes, great. And if you live on the planet and you wake up every morning, you're going to be dealing with stress.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I want you to be able to share a little bit, remind everybody the names of your books here, where they can find you, how to get in contact with you if they're interested in chatting with you. I want them to have all the information. So can you just share how folks can find you?
Sure. I'm very active on LinkedIn, very active on Facebook. Pretty easy to find, Fred Diamond. If you type in Fred Diamond Sales or Fred Diamond Lyme. So both books are available on Amazon, Insights for Sales Game Changers. If anyone's listening is a Lyme survivor, I make the PDF of the Lyme book available for free. It's been available since day one. Excuse me, given out, I think, over 2,500 copies of the book. Wow. Like I mentioned, I'm not in the Lyme industry. I don't sell supplements. I don't have a community. I want to bring peace to a community that needs it. And it's just been, one thing also we talked before is I like the fact that what you're doing with the podcast, and your life is about impact, right? Back to the Einstein quote, only a life lived in the service to others is a life worth living. I've met so many people in the Lyme world who are giving back. They've gone through a lot of the struggles you have, Sierra, and then they've created like a 501c3 to get some funding. As a matter of fact, I did a podcast when I discovered this whole thing. I did a podcast, my sales podcast, in, I think it was the late June of 2021. I brought on 3 people who I had met that I didn't know existed 2 months earlier, who had created Lyme communities.
Okay. One
person created a company that gives micro gifts, $100, so someone can buy herbals or whatever it might be.
Oh, wow.
I met 2 other people who created a Facebook community called Lyme Conquerors, and they were out there. They had gone over the hump. They had really bad Lyme, a lot of the stuff we talked about, constant flares, etc. And then they were able to get over a hump where they were in a good place. And it was a very powerful show. I remember we did it in I think it was June of 2021. And I've met tons of people who want to give back. And I tell people, people say, I'm thinking about writing a book. And I say, write a book. If one person reads your book, then one person reads your book.
Then it was worth it, yeah. If
one person listens to your podcast, then one person listens to your podcast. So I applaud you for the impact that you're bringing, for devoting however long we're talking here of your amazing podcast on Lyme disease, when typically you talk about leadership and growth and personal development, professional development. So applaud you for that, and I thank you for that. people can, I'm all over social media. They could find me in all those places. If you're in the Northern Virginia, DC area, love to meet you if it makes sense as well.
Awesome. Well, our producer typed, "Hold up the book."
This is Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. And this is Insights for Sales Game Changers. I think it's called Lessons from the Most Important Sales Leaders on the Planet.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, thank you so much. And I'll definitely give you a signed copy. You can find it on Amazon. If you're a Lyme survivor, reach out to me via social media.
I have a page of Sierra's Essentials on my website. I'll have to add these to the Essentials so people have a quick, easy link for it.
Feel free. Thank you for doing
Yeah,
that.
yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing chatting with you. What a great experience. Thanks for all that you're doing to advocate for those who have Lyme disease. We need people like you out there. And it was interesting when you asked me about, like, well, I didn't see anything on your LinkedIn about Lyme. I haven't thought about it like that before, honestly. So you have me thinking.
Well, again, I just want to, Larry introduced us, and
Yeah.
Larry, right?
Yeah, Larry, you're right.
So it was, I just want to applaud you for, again, we've mentioned this many times. This is like a very difficult disease. I've met people who haven't gotten out of bed in weeks. I have people who said to me, I don't know who I am. It's called depersonalization. I have people who've said to me, I can't work anymore. I haven't worked in 2 decades.
Yeah.
People who are living, on these Facebook groups, you see people frequently saying, how can I get like government subsidy, to keep living type of a thing. So I just want to, we talked about a lot of things and things that you want to do, but I just want to acknowledge you for your listeners, on doing this and for working hard and for making an impact. And again, if one person, hopefully there's hundreds, if not thousands of people are going to listen to this.
Yeah.
And if there's one, you made an impact, and hopefully you'll keep going with the show, and it's important. And I love the way that you're going about it. Good job with your engineer, and just want to acknowledge you for all you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Well, thanks for sticking through to the end of the episode. I hope you found value in today's topic. And if there is something going on in your life, a cause you believe in, maybe you'll consider, what is your purpose? What impact do you want to have? What can you do with the information you have to help others around you, as Fred has done in his text as well. So thank you so much. Remember to subscribe so you get notifications on Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time when we drop a new episode. And until next time, keep branching out.